Okay, tonight we're going to talk about a new program that I'm jokingly going to call an expansion of the old mentor program. Back in the 70s, many of you old Milfordians will remember a saint, Uncle Paul. And when I say Uncle Paul, everybody knew that meant the Principal Paul Raftery, how much he really cared about kids and what he did to help kids. I was one of them. He's probably the most influential person in my early life, getting me back on the straight and narrow and getting me into Holy Cross. So I'm happy to say that I volunteered for this program. One, I believe what they're doing, but two, I'm just paying back something that an old Milfordian did for me and many others. So let's start with introductions.
My name's Tony Chinappi, a former educator in Milford, resident literally all my life, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Okay. Thanks, and I'm Josh Otlin. I'm the principal of the high school and also a proud lifelong resident.
And Tony, for true transparency, Tony was my teacher when I was in high school.
Yeah, it's amazing you turned out as you did now.
Tell us about this mentor program.
Let me have Josh start it off, because he's the force behind it.
Sure. Yeah, this program, it's an opportunity for us to get accomplished professionals from the community to come in and develop relationships with kids and help them out. I was very fortunate that last year, in my first year at the school, I got to meet Tony and the folks from the Milford Ed Foundation, and they talked to me and they said, look, we'd like to do something to try to make a positive difference in the schools. And Tony was interested in talking about a mentoring program at the high school, and it was just a great opportunity for us to try to bring folks in who have a lot to contribute and give them a chance to make that contribution.
But what does it really mean? I mean, we've got probably 6 people out there watching, and we want to let them know what the program's about and candidly why they should sign on.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, so I think, in very practical terms, it's going to be someone coming in and probably meeting with one student, maybe for like 2 hours a month, maybe 1 hour every other week. Those meetings could take place possibly during the school day in the building. If the mentor and the student and the family make an arrangement, it could be somewhere outside of school. But yeah, so I think, in terms of a time commitment, we're not looking for a lot of hours on a monthly basis. But we are looking for folks who are willing to make a long-term commitment, and that's maybe a good time for Tony to talk a little bit about the kind of long-term commitment we're looking for.
Al, I think you mentioned yourself an opportunity to give back, and that's what kind of intrigued me. We've got a lot of people in town, Milfordians, and people who have come to Milford over time, and they obviously want the best for our kids. This is an opportunity for them to literally come into school, see the kids, meet the kids, see the teachers, the guidance department, just how much things have changed as well, because there's a very diverse population. This all stemmed from a meeting that I attended of the Milford Mass Foundation for Education. A few teachers, elementary teachers, started a 501c3 organization, which I thought was a great idea. I'm involved with a foundation, so I attended a meeting back in February of last year, and I listened to what was going on and what their goals and objectives were and all that, and it was all great stuff, if you will. The thing is, they didn't have any programs to really follow through on. So I kind of reluctantly raised my hand toward the end of the meeting. I said, I'm familiar with a couple of different mentoring programs, one with the state, one down at Falmouth, Massachusetts, where I have a summer home, and they picked me up on it. And basically, yeah, by all means, why don't you look into it, report back to us. So one of the young ladies in the audience that night, Lisa White, she's a school nurse, she contacted me literally the next day, and before I knew it, we had a meeting with Josh, and we had a meeting with Craig Consigli, assistant superintendent, and I think initially we were open to doing anything, kind of saving the world, if you will. We wanted to deal with all the at-risk situations, just everything. And then we came to realize that obviously we can't do that. We've got to be much more directed in our intentions, and like to build in some success and expand from there. So in sitting down with Josh, particularly at the beginning of the school year, we worked out a situation where Josh, through his selection of the students, we'd work on recruiting the mentors, people from the community. There were no school people per se, other than Lisa involved. She's a school nurse, but a young lady from the youth center, Christine D'Addario, a gentleman, Eric Rodriguez from the Wade Church on Pine Street, another young lady who's not a mentor per se, but she's kind of an organizational person, Christine Scafidi. And 4 or 5 of us, under Josh's kind of leadership and encouragement and support, we built upon the concept of college readiness and college completion. Josh has the stats on how those numbers work out, which was really quite startling for me, because it's not an easy track, especially if you're looking at some of the diversity in the school and where the kids are coming from. For example, all of our kids are strong academic kids. And this is where Josh, in his selection process, kind of filtered through. But they're also first-generation kids, much like yourself. So as a result, they didn't necessarily have the role models as to how to go through the whole process, college selection, what courses to take. Now, certainly they get a lot of that, from the guidance people. So we don't want to we just want to supplement what the guidance people are doing. And also just the nature of things these days, a lot of these young people and families are from lower income socioeconomic groups, which again, you can relate to, I can relate to. I was first generation. No one ever told me that we were poor. We always,
Well, it's like when people say the bad side of Milford. I said, thank God nobody ever told the kids from the Heights.
Right, exactly.
We never knew we were from the bad side of Milford.
Those tracks really delineated.
We didn't even have tracks. I guess we were too poor to afford tracks.
Well, my father-in-law lived up there way back when, and he was the originator of condos, if you think the way it's developed over time. That's kind of an overview. I'd like to ask Josh on some of the reasons why we have the kids that we have.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things that we know is when you look at really talented students and you look at what happens to them after high school, really talented students who are facing some pretty significant financial hardships, is that it often doesn't go well. We know that when you look at the very highest achieving students in this country, who also come from homes that are economically disadvantaged, they'll go to college and they'll finish college at a rate of around 42%. These are the very top students, outstanding students, the very best students in the country. So it's not enough to just be smart. It's not enough to just be hardworking. Completing a college degree is it's a hard thing for families and for young adults to take care of, particularly when you're facing some real serious economic hardship. So putting a mentor in place doesn't it doesn't sort of solve all the problems of the world, and it particularly doesn't sort of alleviate the fiscal pressures that can make college completion so difficult for kids. But we also know that there's other factors that that play into college completion, and I think that having one more adult in a student's life, who cares about them and is committed to them over the long haul is a great source of encouragement for kids. It does a great deal for students' confidence, which is incredibly important for their ability to be successful. And it's also helpful to have more folks that can help students take advantage of some insider knowledge to put themselves in the positions they need to be in for success.
Now let me hold you up for a second, because we just went through an election, and one of the candidates made a big point out of the fact that the product we're making is substandard. And I mean, there's a few of us who don't feel we're substandard, and we don't feel like we're products. But the question that was raised was, on what basis? And the answer came out that 50% of Milford High graduates flunk out of college. I had a hard time buying that. Because all the kids I knew, there was one, because of economic problems at home or whatever. But what do you think the real rate of graduation is from our graduates when they go to college?
Well, like a lot of things in statistics, it kind of matters exactly sort of how you want to take that measure. We know that when you look at...
Okay, hold on, Josh.
Yeah.
Make it simple for an old man from the Heights. 260 graduated.
260 graduated, yeah.
And again, I'm not going to hold you to a number. What's your gut feeling of how many went to college?
75% of them.
Okay, so we're talking 200.
Okay.
how many of the 200 that went, wow, 75, that's great. How many of the 200 now graduated college?
I believe about 150.
So it's still 25, 30% that didn't.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you're looking at the kids who never went to college in the first place, and then you're looking at the students who went to college but didn't finish, and you total those students up together, you're getting somewhere between 45 and 50%.
Okay. But I mean, I don't count the kids who didn't go to college.
I think that's fair.
You know, I mean, I've always had, you know, the question to the school committee. It's great that what we do for special needs and ELL. I think it's fantastic. I'll hold Milford school system up against anybody because I've been involved and I've seen the love, the passion, the dedication that goes in. But I also worry about the other 10% of special needs, our top 10%. You know, it's, okay, what are we doing for the top 10%? You know, and what programs are we putting in for that? You know, and when you look at those programs, then you'll say, well, how about the kids who are smart? But, you know, I use my father as an example. He had his 4 years of education in the village in Portugal. He came to America, put him into an organic chemistry class. He wouldn't do well. Put a tool in that man's hand. He was an artist. He could do anything with the tool. So when you think of how many kids go to college, you're saying about 70%.
75%.
75%.
Correct.
The other 25%,
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some of the jobs that they take on. Those are, I mean, a lot of the trade jobs are really impressive. And they make good money. So I don't, you know, when you say 50%, those 25% may be doing exactly what their passion is. They want to be plumbers, carpenters, whatever.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with not going to college, and oftentimes there can be a lot wrong with going to college. So, you know, our hope is that we want to support students in developing good post-secondary plans.
Yes.
There are good post-secondary plans that do not involve college, and there are bad post-secondary plans that do involve college. So I think, you know, helping students figure out what's going to be the right path for them is a complicated process. And I think that the more accomplished, committed adults they have in their life to help support them in making these really complicated decisions for young adults to make, the better off they're going to do.
Well, I remember when my little Emily, I can't call her little anymore, she's 26, but when she got into Holy Cross and we're all celebrating, I looked at my wife and said, do you realize we just spent $250,000? You know, it's like, should I be celebrating? Or maybe tonight's the last night we celebrate as we have to pay $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So
it's nothing to take lightly. You know, this
Right.
it's a huge investment, and in some cases it can be a tremendous risk. And it's not easy for any family to take on financial risk, but particularly when your family's already facing financial hardship. You know, looking down the prospect of taking on what could ultimately be a high-risk venture is a very steep hill for folks to climb.
Well, I think now more, I mean, Tony, you remember we were kids, UMass was your safety school. As soon as you got accepted, because you wrote your name correctly, you got accepted to UMass.
Be careful now, that's where I went.
Well, no,
So,
but
you
I'm
know.
just saying, realistically,
It was.
compared to some of the Ivy League schools around, everybody looked down at UMass. Today, when I see the caliber, and I think a lot of it's not just the investment that we made in UMass as a state, but the fact is, you know, you can get out of UMass for $100,000 with the same BS that you're walking out of Holy Cross that cost you $250,000. So I got to believe that some of the shift, I mean, I want to take pride that it's Massachusetts and that's our flagship school. We should all be proud of it, even though you went there. But realistically, I think the finances, you know, when we graduated, I mean, I don't know how my parents paid for everything. Back then it was $6,000 a year. Not $6,000 a month, but Mom was working at Draper's at $11,000 a year. So it was a big chunk of salary. You know, but when you sit there and say, if you graduate with a $100,000 debt, I mean, God, how do you take a mortgage and a car and everything else?
I'd like to address that a little bit in terms of a term that we've been using more and more is the college fit. In other words, some schools just aren't suitable for some kids. And I think the a student going to the proper school, both academically, financially, socially, is very important. Some of the kids that we're dealing with haven't been exposed to a lot of things, respectfully. And as a result, as we get more into the process and we actually start talking about college selection, I think if the youngster would fit in there is important. We want to work with, and we're not at that point yet on the financial aid aspect, because if they're very good students, if they've taken challenging courses along the way, they have more than respectable college boards, financial need in their situation, again, being first generation, parents coming from where they come from, a lot of out-of-school activities, that whole resume buildup, they're in a position to go to a school that they may not have projected to go to, and theoretically, we could also finance it because of the financial aid need that could be available, especially at some higher prestigious schools that have tremendous endowments, and we're matching up the student, you know, with the school and of course the major and all of that. It becomes possible. Sometimes I think kids underscore themselves. They rely on that school that they know they're going to get into, and they kind of stay there, as opposed to, and again, I can't prove this right now, but that's one of my objectives, is to match up the student with the right school that fits in as many aspects as possible, because, as you said, they just want to get that degree. In one sense, a lot of them will be going on to graduate school for all kinds of professions. So where they get the undergraduate degree, I'm not sure how important it is, as long as they have the stepping stone to go to the next level. That's way beyond our scope right now. But as we get more into the junior year of these particular students, and ultimately the senior year, working with the guidance department, and also, I might mention, and I don't want to jump around too much, but in terms of the recruiting of mentors, we're not necessarily looking for people that want to have the face-to-face contact with the youngsters. We have, for example, one person I mentioned, Christine Scafati, she's like the coordinator. We just recently went to Holy Cross. So she made all the arrangements for us. We just kind of showed up. They were expecting us. It was a nice, and she was doing her thing to help us kind of do our thing. I just met with a gentleman the other day who was more of a guest speaker type person with a tremendous background, where he'd like to occasionally speak with someone interested in engineering or interested in the biosciences or whatever. So there's many roles for many people out there. And I try not to use the word time commitment. It's really time opportunity to kind of interact with a young person. I've learned probably as much about this process as hopefully they have, because we're kind of dated. You know, we think how it was way back when. Right now, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different ballgame, and Josh, might mention some of the AP classes that we're having that can be financially rewarding and challenging for the student, and looks very impressive on the application.
Well, you think back 74, it was fall of 73, when Uncle Paul pulled 3 of us in to his office and said, "We have a problem with you 3. We're looking at each other saying, "You have a lot of problems with us, we know that." And he said, "Well, we have no more science courses for you. You guys have taken them all." I said, "Okay, do we get the year off?" And he said, "No, we're going to put you into," and we didn't have the fancy word advanced placement. He said, "We're going to put you into an advanced chemistry and biology course." I said, "I thought you said you didn't have any." "We don't, but Dean Junior College does. I've registered you."
Wow.
So we got banished from Milford High to go take courses. One of the things I love the most is when I hear Kevin and everybody talk about the opportunities that our kids have to not, don't get me wrong, Dean Jr. treated us just like regular college students. It was an eye-opener. It's like, I got to study for a grade? But tell me about some of the opportunities that these kids have.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate that we've been able to have some good partners in higher education that are making some great opportunities available to our students to do the kind of work that you did as a high school student, to go and do college level coursework, while they're in high school. The most traditional variety of college level coursework that Tony talked about are advanced placement courses, and we offer anywhere from 16 to 19 different advanced placement subjects in a given school year. And then because of our partnerships with higher education, we have presently right now classes after school hours that students can take that are offered by Framingham State University in Mass Bay, where they can earn college credit at no cost to them, transferable college credit that can go into any Massachusetts public college. So really a tremendous opportunity for the kids.
Transferable?
Transferable, that's correct.
So I'm paying 60 grand a year, so it comes out about, you figure what, 60 divided by 8, or 65 divided by, it's $8,000 a course.
Right.
So if I can transfer it,
You got it.
Yeah, that has real cash value for kids, and it can make a real difference in post-secondary outcomes. So we're talking about a lot of kids who start college but can't finish, right? Anything that we can do that's going to reduce the overall cost of college, we think is going to make a positive difference for kids. And so we're really fortunate that we can offer classes to students like advanced placement classes that make them eligible for college credit, that we have dual enrollment arrangements that allow students to earn college credit while in high school. And it's our hope to offer a lot more of this to students as we move forward.
Because think about it. When it comes to scholarship night, we were so excited when Target gave my daughter $1,000, and this place gave $500, and you add it up, and it's a few $1,000s. That's money not coming out of my pocket. You're giving me a chance to make $8,000 a class. That's a better scholarship than I think all of them.
Yeah, and I think the best part about it is the process of earning the credits really helps prepare students for college academics. So you talked about it, Dean. They're treated just like college kids, and that was good for you in terms of your academic development. Right? Taking college level classes in high school, really rigorous classes, we know that high school kids can do it. Pushing them to step up and rise to that challenge holds out a lot of reward for them, both in terms of potential cost savings in college, but also in terms of developing the academic skills necessary to be successful in a college classroom.
Now, you talk about first generation. I could not have asked for more than my parents gave me. My father, God bless him, had no idea what was going on at the school. But when they told him, you need to be at this meeting to support your son, he never really understood how much of an impression, that knowing that he could barely understand what was going on. But he put on his coat, his suit coat was on, he had his little hat, and he went and sat in the audience. All he knew is I'm supposed to be here to support my son. He and my mother were always there. But if we can help the parents understand, that's got to make it twice as easy on the child.
I can address that a little bit in the sense that I'm dealing with 4 boys right now. I'm trying to meet with their parents as much as possible. One, so they have an identity with someone who's in the school system but not really in the school system. And I don't have a quote-unquote a vested interest per se, but I just have a sincere interest to see them do well. And I think some of the parents today are very similar to your parents. Unfortunately, some of them might not be, in the sense that they can't make that meeting because of work, because of other obligations. Sure. So I'm not going to take the place of the parent, but I'm going to encourage them to get the literature from the meeting, or have someone else attend, or I would attend, and the other mentors as well. So we're, as Josh said, we're trying to be another adult into the setting to just encourage the kids to do well. For example, part of the AP program, as far as getting there, our goal is to have the kids take as challenging courses as they can take. Well, they sometimes need some encouragement to do that. Because, you and I know if I got an easy way out, I'm going to probably
If it wasn't for Uncle Paul saying, no, you're not. I remember when I signed up for beginning to Spanish. And he came, he says, oh, by the way, there's a mistake on your list. And so he goes, you speak fluent Portuguese. The Spanish, no. You're going into second level Spanish at worst. I was like, oh. My parents wouldn't know. I'd be bringing home A's and B's, and to them, that was what they expected. And
well,
done.
I'd like to think we would catch that and stop it right in its tracks and talk to the student about why, and have them understand, and even maybe bring in the teacher, or just do something. Or there might be another person in the community who could address that situation. Our program is called Connections, so we're trying to make connections within the community so that when we can't address something, someone else can. Just for example, one of the young ladies that's in the program, she had an interest in becoming a veterinarian. So she wanted to do a job shadowing experience. So I just picked up the phone, called Dr. Augusto at the Milford Animal Hospital, formerly Dr. Hellers, and I asked him if she could shadow one of the girls and do the things that would be done during a normal day, and he was very open to it. So she went up, they gave her the jacket and everything, and she just shadowed him around all day, and it was a really worthwhile experience. She sat with the girls during lunch and heard some of the gossip there and all that, so it was a real day's experience. Now, I don't know if she's going to become a veterinarian, but she has a little bit more insight into it. And if she continues showing that interest, we'll do it again. And we'll go to another animal hospital, or we'll have someone from the community come in and speak on the topic. It's those little extra things that Josh can only do so much. Yeah. And his faculty can only do so much.
And I think what Tony's describing is really a great example of where the power of a mentoring program lies. And I want to pick up on something Tony said. Tony said, we're not trying to stand in place of parents.
No.
Similarly, we're not trying to stand in place of guidance counselors.
Right.
Our mentors are being adults who are investing themselves in these young people. And you're talking about your parents investing themselves in you, being there for you. What a difference that makes, right?
Sure.
In the way that we see ourselves, the way that we think about our future, and the way that we approach our future. So doing things like, connecting students to a professional in the community so they can come in and do a shadow experience. That's something that maybe for Tony Chinappi isn't a big deal, but for a lot of our families, that's just not on the
Josh,
table.
I gotta believe that my parents would have benefited. I mean, not that it's not burnt into my brain here, but I remember one day when I showed up at the old Spruce Street School, and there was my mother and father. I was like, okay. I got a red 4 in conduct on my report card. My parents looked at this and said, this could be an embarrassment to the family. Now, if you think about, if you screwed up in school, Mr. Raftery, beat me, do whatever you want. I know it's politically incorrect, but don't call my mother. That was the worst sin, is that I would be viewed as embarrassing the family. They didn't know what a red 4 in conduct meant, but they knew it didn't look good.
Yeah.
So,
and frankly, they would look at the conduct and effort mark before they looked at the grade.
Absolutely.
Because you got to be a good boy in school.
That was it. And they showed up and the teacher said, well, no, he's not unruly. He just talks too much.
Yeah.
Surprise, right?
Yeah.
But I could see if there was somebody who could have spoken to them in Portuguese and said, okay, this is not truly an embarrassment. This is the teacher caring enough to want to send a signal. I said, well, couldn't you have just written shut up? But, I can see where I would be happy to mentor a kid. And if they spoke Portuguese, the old days I could have done Russian, a couple other French, and a couple other languages. Today, it's been 30 years. I wouldn't dare. But, somebody that's Brazilian, that's just come here, Portuguese, you could meet with the parents too. And even if you can't really offer them anything except experience, that we lived through this is what it means. Oh, by the way, if that's a concern of yours, call so-and-so. Here's the phone number at the high school. Or go see Nancy down at Stacy. Make an appointment and she'll explain it.
Yeah. And, I think when you're talking, what it makes me think about is, I think all of us as parents, we all want our children to have a lot of good adults in their life who hold them to high expectations, who are there for them consistently, right? That's what this is about. It's just providing more adults in kids' life that can play that role.
So realistically, what age do we start? Is it freshman in high school with this program?
Right now our plan, and this year was a pilot program, we weren't sure. We had to do it uniquely for Milford. Milford is really different.
It's the center of the universe. Why wouldn't it be?
It's different. Let's put it this way. The Milford that I knew as a student, the Milford that you knew as a student, is not the same Milford now. I would ask some people from the community, and again, to walk into the school, which you can't do.
Right.
For security purposes. But once you get the okay to just take about 20 steps into the lobby, the main lobby at the high school. Most people have never been in the high school. But if you came in and classes were changing, and you looked around, and you saw the makeup of the school population, I think it would be very surprising.
Oh, absolutely, because if you asked me, when we were there, what's the makeup? Portuguese, Italian, Irish.
Throw in a few Jewish people.
Yeah, there's some Jewish
sprinkle,
kids,
yeah.
but somehow, that was it. It was 4. Maybe a Spanish, meh. But okay, maybe we have 5 ethnic groups. And that was about it. And really, you never thought of them as Portuguese, Italian. You thought of them as the Plains, the Heights, Luby Ave. I always laughed and said up at the Heights, we were too busy living diversity to wonder what it was. We had our 6 origin countries, and that's what mattered. Luby Ave.
So that was the neighborhood.
The Plains. Until, if you remember, band concerts. We're either going to go listen to Aerosmith or go to the Wednesday night band concerts. Water Street, the hill by the Larkins,
Yeah.
Larches.
Yeah.
That was the great divide, because when you hit the top of the hill, you turned your hat around. Now the kids from the Plains and Luby Ave, they're Milford kids. So any of the Hopedale kids who picked on them, well, now they're my cousins here. Then when we came back over the hill, I said, get back to the Plains. This is the Heights.
Yeah.
So, there is a change, because I bet you deal with more than 5 languages in the high school now.
Oh.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have tremendous diversity in the school. It makes for a really rich experience for our kids, and as Tony said, we love for folks to come in and meet these great young people that we have in the school and try to make a positive difference in their life.
And it's funny, because although it's changed, I would challenge anybody that's new to Milford, because we all know the definition of a true Milfordian is 3rd generation Milford, and you must live within 2 miles of your mother. You think about it, that's when we call somebody.
That's where I am.
Hello, but you start thinking about what makes Milford. A couple years ago, when we went into a little tightness in finances, I was one of the ones that got up at town meeting and said, I don't need anybody from Beacon Hill or Capitol Hill to tell me how to take care of Milford kids. Town meeting is always stepped up. I can be proud, and I am proud, to say that town meeting has never let our kids down. When you look at our SPED kids, our ELL kids, we're spending more than we have to. Nobody has to tell us how to take care of our kids. We take care of them. So from that end, the Milford I knew when I grew up, my father with his little hat and coat showing up, not knowing why, but saying, I'm supposed to be here. I still see that in 200 plus town meeting members. They really care about the kids, and they'll do what is needed. And we don't need anybody from outside of the center of the universe to tell us how to do it.
And again, if you took that walk into the high school and you kept on going into the media center, the library, and you looked up on the ceiling and on the walls, you'd see about 60 or 58 flags. And all those flags have some representation within the school population.
58?
Yeah, we're gonna raise a few more new flags in just a week or 2, I believe.
So that's evidence right there that it's quite different.
That's amazing.
That's great.
And again, I think you have to enjoy the diversity. And I think the kids get along well. I think there's a lot of harmony. I think I see a lot of kids helping each other. I just want other people to see that. And again, for any community adults who want to volunteer, we're having some informational sessions actually next week, next Thursday, which is the 2nd, and on Wednesday, the 8th. We're going to conduct actually 4 sessions. They're just informational. It's just to give enough information out so you can think about it a little bit more. We're going to give one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the media center so they can see the flags. And again, at 7 o'clock that night, Thursday. And then on the following Wednesday, again, 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock. we'll have an outline of much of the things that we're talking about now. And again, people can get a feel for the school. There might be some kids doing some extra work there, get a look at them. It's really an opportunity to give back, to feel like that they're a part of the school system as well, not just a taxpayer.
So if I sign up, you're going to pair me up with somebody.
Yes.
Hopefully, anybody out there who's bilingual, people who have a second language, I think we have an extra responsibility to help people, because if people in Milford in 1939 hadn't helped my grandfather get situated, I'd be in a field in the mountains of Portugal. And I can never forget that it was Milfordians who opened their doors to help my family. So me helping other immigrants, I'm doing nothing but paying back a debt from a long time ago. But, okay, so I get paired up with a kid.
And then we'd go over the logistics of the high school situation again, which is quite different. We've got a new schedule in place for next year. We had a 7-day schedule, now rotating. It's a lot simpler now. There are a couple of periods a week that are kind of fixed into the schedule, so that we could, for example, given your work schedule, if that worked for you on Wednesday around noontime, every other Wednesday or every third Wednesday, whatever, that might be your block of time. If you can't do that, then we'd find some time after school. We've got one young lady who wasn't able to do the school day thing, so she meets with her young lady at the youth center at around 4 or 5:30 in the afternoon, and they do that on a regular basis. The parents are aware of it. We provide transportation, or we work out transportation. That's in my case, I've been meeting with some kids, some boys during the school day. I've gone now to after school. We work out if they're playing sports or are in activities. And that's another thing, Al. What I'm finding, the kids that we're working with, and again, the first generation kids, from wherever they come from, they're not as open to activities as I think some of the other kids. I don't have the answer for that. But I know from a college readiness point of view, that's important, that they are involved. For example, this Saturday, we're planning as a group unofficially to join the beautification day, the cleanup day. So we're going to show up by Sacred Heart Church and just be assigned to whatever. That will go on their resume that they're starting to compile. And more things like that will be added to their resume.
Something like that. I remember when I was coaching, I had a young lady playing my striker position, and she was good. When her father showed up, she was great. I don't know what it was, but somehow it was like me looking out into the auditorium and seeing my parents. It was a little lift. And I went to him and I said, "Why are you here so infrequently?" And Portuguese male, we're men. This is a girl sport. I looked, I said, "You know something, just out of curiosity, are you that wealthy that $150,000 means nothing to you?" And he looked and says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Your daughter's good enough that she could get a scholarship. She could go to college for free. And you're the one that's going to hold her back and have to pay out of your pocket." He never missed a game after that.
Okay, and that's the point. He didn't know.
That's what I'm saying.
It wasn't in his culture. His priority was work, maybe.
Or I think it's what I referred to earlier as insider knowledge, right? So in raising our children, we know we're going to push them to play sports. We're going to push them to be involved in community service, right? We're going to make opportunities available. We're not just going to say, "Hey, you go take care of this on your own." We're going to help to structure some situations to get them started, right? That's the kind of insider knowledge that can really make a decisive difference for kids in terms of putting them in a position where they can really optimize their success.
But see, that was what you said. You got to start early. You got to start 8th grade going into 9th to say it's now time for you to look at a JV sport so you're ready for varsity because.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I had no idea when I was growing up. My parents, I got home, we went into the farm. That's what my father did after he worked all day. That was his relaxation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he taught me my little tractor, and I would plow and think it was so cool.
You would
Nobody ever took me down to baseball. It wasn't, I was already 4 years behind on any
But
sport.
you did it for your children, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly. Because you knew. You knew
I mean,
that. You knew
my grandson,
that's
2.5 years old, is pretending to play soccer every Saturday. He hasn't started playing yet. They just run around and kick the ball. But he's learning. I mean, you know what it was like when you were coaching.
Yeah.
You're teaching them life skills of working as a team, of respecting authority. You know, I mean, who would mess with you? Yeah.
And that puts you at such an advantage when you become a young adult. So, we talk about, the importance of high school athletics, right? There's so much character development that goes on for kids. But there's a lot of students who, if there's no one pushing them to do it, and they're not like a natural athlete, well, maybe they're not going to do it. And then they lose out on so much, right? So again, to have more adults in their life who care about them, who have high expectations, who have some of this kind of insider knowledge, it's great for kids.
And again, when I look at Milford High, I've been so impressed with the athletic director. He won me over when he came on the show the first time and said, I have student athletes, not athletes who happen to be in school.
That's right.
You know, when Pete started talking about how less than 1/10 of 100th of 1/1000,000,000% of his kids, even the best athletes, are going to ever really make a living playing pro football, pro baseball.
Right.
He's got to make sure that they understand their priority is academics. I said, this guy's got his act together. Because he's right.
Absolutely.
You know, we had 1 or 2 professional athletes coming out of Milford, we're all excited. But how many did you coach that didn't make it?
Most,
Yeah.
most if not all, to be honest with you.
So again, getting, like you say, getting the information to these kids and their parents, to me makes all the sense in the world. Because it will make a difference. I don't think most people really understand. We were doing scholarship reviews up at Holy Cross, and I remember that we had 30 in front of us to go through. And I said, well, these 2 you can throw out, they're deadbeats. And the rest of the people saying, what do you mean? I said, look at this guy. He got a B+ his freshman year in high school. And this girl, a B in phys ed and a B+, they're obviously deadbeats. And we said, you're not serious. I said, of course not. Looking at their transcripts is useless. Every kid there, except for 2, had straight A's. Academically, I can't tell you that an A from Josh is better than an A from Joe. You know, at another school, no, looks like an A to me. So you start looking for, were they involved?
That's right.
You know, and when we go through it, it's church, community. You know, you go through things to say, what did you do for your community? What did you do for your church? What did you do for your town and the school system in it? And I would have never known that.
Yeah.
I would have.
You know, we really emphasize that because the kids come to us as good students on paper, you know, much like the quote-unquote A students. But it's the other side of them that, that we're trying to develop. And the parents are trying to do it also. They just might not know exactly how to do it. For example, we just updated some of the different clubs and activities in the school and the time involvement and all of that. It's got to be, and we have to get that information out there. We've got a couple of people, for example, we've got one young man who's in the theater group, but in the backstage. He's a setup guy. And I asked him if he would someday consider being an on-stage guy. He said, you know what, I never thought of that, you know? He likes being in the background. He's a shy kid and all that. So, and that's fine. That's his role. But maybe he can step up to that next level, and maybe he won't.
In some of these mentor programs, I'm involved with one at Holy Cross. Now, you would think by the time they're late teens, 20s, they have their act together. Yet, a lot of the kids who went in there as bio majors, I mean, it took me 2 years to convince my daughter, get out of pre-med. These doctors, medical doctors, work too hard for not enough money. Get in the business side. You know, you can make as much or close to it, and you don't have the crazy schedule that the... Now, the people who have a passion for medicine, stay with it. It's a great profession if you have a passion. But these kids didn't understand. They didn't understand that if they're in chemistry, they better go for their PhD if they want to stay on the bench. Otherwise, they'll be a technician for the rest of their lives. You know, and you say, you got the gender ceiling. Yeah, I told my girls, just work harder and run over anybody in your way. That's simple. But you'll never get over the PhD. That's not a glass ceiling, that's titanium. But they have to know that.
And I think for the most part, our guidance people are telling them that. What I think our role is to reinforce that and maybe show them, because we're going to have more time with them. That's the key, having more time with the kids in an informal situation also. Let me also, Al, mention about where we're going with this. We've started with 4 mentors, connectors, and we started with 8 young people. They're going to be sophomores. So they're going to continue with the mentors, or we have to fill in one case. Then we've got at least 8 new students coming in. If the 8th grade is now freshmen. And then eventually they'll move up to sophomores. The juniors, the sophomores will move up to juniors, et cetera, et cetera. So at one point in time, we could have like 16 mentors and a ton.
But what you're saying is, I mean, Holy Cross, I meet with my students frequently because I go to Holy Cross basketball games, football games. So I'm coming up to campus anyway. Why don't we just get together before or halftime, and that's how I get my time in with them.
Yeah.
It could be the same thing.
That's important time.
You know, especially if you're a Milford High alumni, it'd be nice to go see a football game. Of course, one of the gals that we inherited years ago came from a little school called Odessa Permian out in West Texas. People kind of heard of it from the TV show of Friday Night Lights.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember
So I took her to my first Milford High game. And she looked at me and said, okay, Al, where are all the people?
Exactly.
I said, what do you mean? We got about 1,000 people. I'm really proud. She goes, no.
Not for Texas.
She says, where I am, we get 25,000. She says, our final divisional, whatever they called it, playoffs, was in the Astrodome. You know, so it just showed you, wow. You know, I would have never known such a thing. And, you know, you take experience from people and what it means. Because if you ever told me that you would shut down the town of Milford to go to a football game, we'd have to start building a bigger stadium.
We used to do that in baseball, but that's another story for another time. Let me also mention, Al, our primary focus is college readiness, but there's also an aspect of college completion, going back to some of Josh's stats. So we envision our role when the young people that I'm working with move up freshman, sophomore, junior, and then ultimately graduate. We feel that I still have a responsibility to work with them on a very informal basis, just to check on them, if you will. So if they're having a problem, because we would know them best by that time.
Tony, they don't go away. We inherited girls who were playing soccer for the Boston Breakers. I got a call once. Can you put up a girl for a weekend? What am I going to say, no? A week? A month? 2 years later, she's still living with us. And she's become an inherited daughter. One of them we just flew out to Vancouver for her wedding. And they keep in contact. I mean, now they're retiring. They're no longer on the U.S. national team. We don't see them on the Olympics and World Cup, but they're still our kids.
Yep.
You know, after years.
And another aspect of that I know we emphasize is networking. You never know where, you know, what your roommate's father's going to be, you know, what company he owns or whatever. So even in high school, there's a networking, very basic, but there's a scheme to it, if you will, in a positive
But
sense.
what I'm hearing is you can adapt your schedule.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like our kids. You want to help your kids, you adapt. You know, not everybody. I mean, my father could not say, stop the assembly line at General Motors Framingham. I want to go see my kid play soccer. Yeah, it ain't going to happen. But if it was a Saturday or Sunday, he'd be there.
For sure.
So it could be the same thing. I could go to a Milford High event or a Milford Town event and meet with my student. Go down and visit with the Utes. Go down and visit with the Utes at the youth center. I mean, that's a fantastic program.
Exactly.
And, you know, go up to the study room, sit down, and that can happen at any time. And we've got it here, Josh, with the kids you send. It's amazing what these kids do. I mean, I remember when they came to me and said, Mr. C, your opening for the show we have to redo it. And I said, what's wrong with that? And I'll never forget, one of them looked and said, well, it's kind of tired, especially that analog printer sound.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there saying, analog printer? I'm thinking the old, remember the dot matrix?
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember any bzz, bzz, bzz. No, they meant the click, click, click. Then I had to realize these kids never grew up knowing what a typewriter was. So what they called an analog printer was the typewriter. You know, but you sit there and say, today, they have the opportunity to come down to the Milford TV studio and work with people who know what they're doing, with state-of-the-art editing systems, state-of-the-art equipment. What a great program for kids who want to get into AV.
That's a mentoring program. You got it without knowing it.
Without even thinking.
Without putting a label on it.
You know?
It's just helping out, you know, passing on, and just feeling good about it. That's the motivation that all our people have. No greater expectations.
Well, especially when they hit like junior year. Because now you start saying, okay, it's time to start going to visit. You know, like I told you about Holy Cross. You know, come May of junior year is when, in my mind, you ought to get out there. Because the people who are in admissions now have a 2-month break. Come the end of May, they've already got their classes accepted and filled. Now they can breathe for 2 or 3 months before the fall rush starts. But who knew that? I mean, the kids don't know. They wait till second semester senior year and then wonder why their interviews are with other students and not, you know, at Holy Cross, it's like, okay, call Ann, because Miss Ann is Dean of Admissions. She runs the place. You know, Annie Bo McDermott is the name you should know if you really want to get into Holy Cross. Not one of her students, even though they'll do a good job. It's still better to get to know her. Well, how would a student even know?
Yep.
So what else? I'm going to sign up. You're going to pair me up. Hopefully with a family I can help with the language and the experience.
No problem.
And then I'm going to meet with them an hour here, an hour next week, one way or another on the phone. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, you got a whole social media.
Milford is big, and it's a lot of traffic. But even if all 9 cars are on the road at the same time, I can get anywhere in Milford in a few minutes. I know people going down Main Street are going to say, yeah, he's never driven on Main Street. Okay, so go around Main Street.
At certain times.
At certain times. What else would I do as a mentor?
You know, we'd explore that. We'd look to see, just as we look to see what the students' strengths and weaknesses are, we'd look to see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you tell us. I mean, over time, there'll be other activities, hopefully, as we grow, that will expand the reach of the things that we do. I mentioned this gentleman coming in, not wanting to, you know, not necessarily
Sure.
wanting to have the hands-on, so to speak, but he wanted to make himself available whenever we needed him. We're formulating that. Again, we just finished a pilot program. We're hoping during the course of the summer to have some workshops where we can provide a little bit more content so people know what to do. A lot of it is on the internet. I mean, this is another thing. I mean, I pull out a pad of paper and they open up their computer. And I say, you know, something, you know, can you write this down somewhere? Well, they're writing
already
it down.
did.
Yeah. And can you remember this? And they're putting it in their phone. I mean, I've got to adjust to them. They're not going to adjust to me.
And so, Al, also in response to your question, you know, what else is it going to mean for me as a mentor? Something that our mentors have done in the pilot year, which I think has been positive, they've done a number of activities with the students as a group, where all of our mentors and all of our students have gotten together.
Well,
So,
see, I was going to ask
yeah.
you. One of the things that helped us out at Holy Cross, now the kids come from many geographies, so we have to do it on the school. But do you bring mentors, mentorees together? Just, we're going to have some hors d'oeuvres and come over to the house for a couple hours, meet each other. Because then I can ask somebody else saying, how are you doing this? What else are you doing?
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of sharing. There's no, Josh sometimes uses the word a silver bullet. There's no one formula because the kids are all different as well. Some will respond better to certain items than they will to others. But yeah, that would be a great idea for us to do. Then we will do that during the summer.
Because I just remember we had, what was it? I remember my wife coming home saying, are we having people over the house this week? I said, oh yeah, the French students. They're coming. She says, how many are coming for dinner? I said, I think 70.
70.
And she goes, no, Albert, is 104 signed up. And it was funny because all the parents that were hosting kids just got together and talked. And the kids got together, you know, one-on-one. And that was the best thing. We didn't do anything. We just sat back. So something like that, I think would be valuable. I'd be happy to open up my home to these people and just have them come out.
We may take you up on that. We're putting those plans together. Right now, we're just looking for people. I've had a pretty good response already. Several people have contacted me. One gentleman is unable to make one of the sessions, so I'll meet with him on an individual basis. Very informal, and again, the content isn't complex. A lot of it, especially the first year, is just getting to know the student for the most part. We've got some guidelines, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, things that need to be covered when the SATs become more relevant, when the college visits become more relevant. But initially, it's just a matter of getting to know the young people, some of their ways, some of their language, how they function on a daily basis. Communication is important. Sometimes it's difficult during the school day to reach someone. The new phone policy in the school, limits any kind of contact. And so we have to work out some things. It by no means.
But it starts with, if I could summarize, May 2nd or May 8th.
Yes.
Either 3 in the afternoon or 7 at night. Come up to the high school, get a first-hand view of what's going on. Or how do they get a hold of you?
It's right in the news releases that we had in the paper, but my email address is tonychinappi@yahoo.com. I don't mind giving out.
That's an old Milford name, but there may be non-Milford people. How do you spell Chinappi?
Okay. CHINAPPI. I'll give out my cell number, 508-735-7272.
And if you forget it, there's always, hello, Milford High, I'd like to talk to the principal.
There you go.
I can't remember his name, but I know he's the principal.
Sure, absolutely.
But if nothing else, think about how you could help a Milford kid. I mean, that, when Tony says Milford's changed, the faces may have changed, the colors of the flags may have changed, but I'll bet dollars to donuts that the love for this town and the love for our kids may not all be Italians, Portuguese, and Irish anymore. There's 52 other flavors thrown in. But deep down, I see it every time we go in front of the town meeting. I see it every time that Milford kids need help. Consider getting involved. And I hope that you will help a Milford kid. So, as always, good night. May God bless. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
As always.
Thanks, Al.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.